and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. It is Wednesday the 15th. All this Ebola news is really starting to aggravate me because I can see what's happening, whether it be intentional or not. For me, it really does seem like it would be intentional. Here's one, let it pop up here. This one out of a CBS local station. Again, once it loads. CBS DFW. CDC, Ebola patient traveled by air with low-grade fever. This is a second Ebola patient here. Give me a second. I want to make sure this is a video going to blare in my ear. Says here, the CDC has announced that the second healthcare worker diagnosed with Ebola, now identified as Amber Joy Benson of Dallas, traveled by air October 13th with a low-grade fever a day before she showed up at the hospital reporting the symptoms. The CDC is now reaching out to all passengers who flew on Frontier Airlines Flight 1143 Cleveland to Dallas, Fort Worth. The flight landed at 8:16 p.m. Central. All 132 passengers on the flight are being asked to call 1-800-CDC-INFO. Public health professionals will begin interviewing passengers about the flight Wednesday afternoon. And of course, something's going to play here. Commercial or something. Okay. Oh, scroll a little too far there. Although Vincent did not report any symptoms and she did not meet the fever threshold of 100.4, she did report at the time she took her temperature and found it to be 99.5, said CDC Director Tom Frieden. Her temperature, coupled with the fact that she had been exposed to the virus, should have prevented her from getting on the plane, he said. I don't think that changes the level of risk of people around her. She did not vomit. She was not bleeding. so the level of risk of people around her would be extremely low. Now we see that they keep telling us, oh, the exposure is extremely low, and people keep getting infected. People that have had gear on to, you know, deal with this, to be in close contact with these people, have come down with it. Um, I think that this is being allowed to happen because no one in their right mind would say, well, we'll just let it get a little bit bigger before we act. No. Um, there could be something else behind this, and it seems that precautions aren't being taken um, by officials that are said to be there to protect us. Um, at least that's what they want you to believe. And at the same time, this stuff is spreading. Obama had recently, before this all really came down, um, passed an executive order and basically saying anybody, even with any signs of any respiratory issues, could be detained. You had all these kids coming down with this respiratory illness. And then you had this Ebola come to light. Um, Out of Zero Hedge, they have the public health emergency declaration right here for Connecticut, and highlighted in it says here, I authorize the Commissioner of Public Health to order the isolation and quarantine under conditions prescribed by the Commissioner of Public Health. So let me read that little portion again. I authorize the Commissioner of Public Health to order the isolation or quarantine under the conditions prescribed by the Commissioner of Public Health of any individual or group of individuals whom the Commissioner reasonably believes to have been exposed to, infected with, or otherwise at risk of passing the Ebola virus. I am filing this declaration with you under my hand and seal on the 7th day of October 2014, and it's signed here by the Governor, Malloy, 10:04 a.m. And it just seems that end games seem to be playing out in this scenario, which here in America, it might not be that big yet, but it seems to be allowing to persist. It seems like the government is going, yeah, we care, and not doing anything, allowing it to continue to spread. I have a clip here from Alex Jones' channel. It's with David Knight. NDAA on steroids, Ebola death camps. And I would be cautious to go, this is happening, this is going to happen, even though, Joel Skousen's even come out saying that it's imminent. But I would say that I would err on a side of caution because we don't want to ramp up with fear over it, but we also have to be aware that this could happen. This is a potential. This could be one of those nightmares played out. So I'm going to play this clip here.
Fox News celebrities are floating a trial balloon for FEMA camps that they've now rebranded as Ebola camps. Here's what they propose.
I think they should set up special centers for just Ebola in each state. They shouldn't be letting people go into regular hospitals where it could be spread.
Right.
For this specific disease, we should have a special facility with specially trained people who know exactly how to deal with this in each city. That way it's not spread. And when the person walks in, they know what they're looking for. They know if they find it, they know how to contain it.
He probably doesn't want to do it, but Rudy Giuliani would be perfect for this particular role.
Why not put in Fox contributor Oliver North? He's the guy that originally gave us the blueprint for martial law and FEMA camps back in 1984 when he wrote Rex 84. Have you seen anyone on Fox News or any mainstream media suggest that there should be an independent review and hearing for people that they want to quarantine into these camps to ensure that it's legitimate, that it's not being abused? No, you haven't heard anybody say that. As a matter of fact, we've just seen Obama in July give himself by executive fiat the power to apprehend and detain anyone that they believe has the potential to become sick. This is the NDAA, indefinite detention by the military on steroids. And then, of course, there's the health issues. How do we keep people who may be misdiagnosed for Ebola, who may simply have a fever or flu, from being locked up with people who do have Ebola, contracting it, spreading it? The idea that this actress puts out there that people would voluntarily go to these places, that they would accurately self-diagnose themselves as having Ebola, no one is going to voluntarily go to what will become death camps. Our government declares no-fly zones at the drop of a hat. They isolate entire countries using no-fly zones, using embargoes, and they do it for political and economic reasons. But they won't isolate these countries with a pandemic that at the current unabated rate of growth will expand to 5 to 15% of the population. Quite frankly, our government wants this to get out of hand. They could do something about it. Let's look at a third world country and what they had the will and the ability to do. This is the area right now where this is going on the hottest. Of course, Guinea is where it started. Sierra Leone and Liberia, it is still growing exponentially. Now, bordering Liberia, where it is the worst, is the Ivory Coast. They typically have migrant workers cross this border during chocolate season. They're going to shut down that crop, that harvest, by blocking this from migrant workers. They have the ability and the will to close their open borders. They will take the economic hit, but our government won't because they put economics above the population's health. Now, there's another lesson to be had from this. We can look at the story of two countries here, Liberia and Nigeria. Now, in the one case, in Nigeria, this is not contiguous with the countries that are currently having the outbreak. They're way over here. Nigeria is over here, but that was brought in airborne on an airplane. One man lied his way into Nigeria. He was very sick by the time he got off the plane. His symptoms manifested while he was in travel. That's something for us to remember because when people are traveling from this area to Western countries, they have journeys that take anywhere to go to the United States. It takes up to 33 hours and multiple stops. He got sick on his journey, got out, was very sick. That created a small epidemic. He gave it to 20 other people, 8 of whom subsequently died, but they contained that single case. So much like the United States, Nigeria has Ebola introduced to it by a single person traveling by air. How did they contain it? Well, they used rapid contact tracing. They looked at primary, secondary, and tertiary contacts. They isolated and watched those people. That turned out to be 898 people. Have you seen that kind of work done by the CDC in America? I haven't. Contrast that to Liberia. Right now in Liberia, there have been 4,076 people who have contracted Ebola. So far, there's been 2,300 deaths. Many people are still sick. Their casualty rate is 70%. What did they do differently? Well, they had open borders. They had politicians telling them not to worry. It's not as serious as it appears. And they have actually censored the news media, threatening reporters, threatening healthcare workers to not talk about this, threatening to arrest people. They've also suspended elections this week. Which country do we look like? Is it more like Nigeria or is it more like Liberia? And once we get to a pandemic like they've got in Liberia, of course, Fox News is presenting the FEMA camps. We'll call them Ebola camps. For InfoWars Nightly News, I'm David Knight.
Okay. Well, the one thing he, pointed out, same thing I was pointing out, we don't seem to see a will to try to prevent this from spreading. Special interests are being put above the public interest. Um, Typical for politicians to do this. Should not be really a surprise. I think some of it's being hyped, but I think of some of it's being hyped for reasons. Um, we seen the hyping of the H1N1, and we see what really came of that. Um, this whole Ebola could be a hyping, but it also could be a real threat too. And we know that they really don't care the means if they can accomplish their goals. And when I say them, people that are profiting off of your labor and your life. That this is what politicians are now. They are leeches that are literally putting themselves in positions and claiming power over you and gaining billions of dollars off of the world. And you really get this division between the elitists and the rest of the population. And the elitists of all countries, definitely the ones that are allied together, you tend to see that there's other people behind the scenes that tend to pop up with all these countries. Um, Special interest, central banking, and you can even look at how the United Nations are, but it really comes down to they like to use any crisis to their advantage to seek more control over the populace to continue their growth of wealth and power over others. They do not want to let that go. They have no interest on letting that go. And when you really see that they are the few and we are the many, you see how much actual control they have over people. You say it's all in the mind. Well, it's not all in the mind because it's playing out in reality. It's playing out in the physical form where people are subservient to others. And I think that's the one cause that has allowed us to get this far from freedom. It is just we've lived in a fallacy for too long. And it's hard to break people out. It's like, the Matrix, breaking people out of it's not something easy to do. And when it's gone on for generations, and this is something that's kind of bred into the populace, that it really takes a hold and allows the system to continue. I think what we are now seeing, though, because of the internet, because of technology, we see people finding little slithers of freedom that allows them to be imaginative and, be able to create things, be able to expand their knowledge and seek out different ideologies and really start expanding their mind to the point that they do think for themselves, because no longer are they really only knowing to maybe a couple ideologies. They have everything right there at the tip of their fingers. And even when government tries to block that, tries to prevent that, there's ways around it. Viewing things by proxy. There's something that was posted, I think it was on Behind the Curtain on Facebook, from Wired.com, and I had seen something like this before, and I posted a link to the one I've seen before, but it says here, from Wired.com. With this tiny box, you can anonymize everything you do online. Says here, no tool in existence protects your anonymity on the web better than the software Tor, which encrypts internet traffic and bounces it through random computers around the world. But regarding anything other than web browsing, Tor has required a mixture of finicky technical setup and software tweaks. Now routing all your traffic through Tor may be as simple as putting a portable hardware condom on your Ethernet cable. Today, a group of privacy-focused developers plans to launch a Kickstarter campaign for Anabox. The $45 open-source router automatically directs all data that connects to it by Ethernet or Wi-Fi through the Tor network, hiding the user's IP address and skirting censorship. It's also small enough to hide in a pack of cigarettes. Anabox's tiny size means users can carry the device with them anywhere, plugging it into an office Ethernet cable to do sensitive work, or in cyber cafe in China to evade the Great Firewall. The result, if Anabox fulfills its security promises, is that it could become significantly easier to anonymize all your traffic with Tor, not just web browsing, but email, instant messaging, file sharing, and all the other miscellaneous digital exhausts that your computer leaves behind online. Now, what I've seen for this, it's from adafruit.com, adafruit.com. It's called the Onion PI Pack with large antenna make a Raspberry Pi Tor proxy. And it says here in the description, want something more compact? Feel like someone is snooping on you? Browse anonymously anywhere you go with the Onion PI Tor proxy. Using this pack of parts and a free weekend, you can build a project that uses a Raspberry Pi, a USB Wi-Fi adapter, and Ethernet cable to create a small, low power and portable privacy Pi. After it's built, using it is easy as pie. First, plug the Ethernet cable in an internet provider in your home, work, hotel, or conference event. Next, power up the Pi with the micro USB cable to your laptop or to the wall adapter. The Pi will boot up and create a new secure wireless access point called Onion Pi. Connecting to the access point will automatically route any web browsing from your computer through the anonymizing Tor network. This pack comes with everything you need, $108 of parts for $95. We donate a portion of the sales to the EFF and Tor. Each order comes with the Raspberry Pi Model B, Adafruit Pi case, Wi-Fi adapter with antenna, 10-foot Ethernet cable, micro USB cable, 5-volt, 1-amp power adapter, USB console cable, 4GB SD card with Wheezy. So there's ways out there to really block or unblock, block snoopers and unblock blocked websites. And whenever more tyranny is, tried upon us, there's people out there that are creating ways to get around it, which, things like startpage.com do a good job of that, using proxies to view websites that are blocked in your country, which I've actually came across websites that were blocked. And it amazed me because they were UK websites, but they were blocked in the US. Just kind of surprised me. But we need things like that to be able to spread the message of freedom, of liberty, to seek out the truth, to get other opinions on things, and really be able to free ourselves from a system that is constantly trying to clamp down on us. I've seen some interesting from benswan.com. Oath upheld. This is kind of surprising to me. I really think so. Nashville cops refuse Secret Service request for a legal search of Obama critic. I'm going to play this here.
There's already a lot of fodder to attack the Secret Service with, and this will be more.
Tonight, News Channel 5 Investigates uncovers stunning new allegations involving the U.S. Secret Service and an incident with Metro Police. Those allegations come directly from Nashville Police Chief Steve Anderson, who says Secret Service agents wanted his officers to fake a search warrant.
Even more disturbing, the chief says he complained to top Secret Service bosses, and they didn't seem to care.
News Channel 5 Chief Investigative Reporter Phil Williams has been digging into the details.
The allegations are contained in this letter that Chief Anderson sent last week to several members of Congress, potentially adding new fuel to the red-hot Secret Service scandal.
Don't let somebody get close to the president. Don't let somebody get close to his family.
The letter went to members of the House Committee on Oversight who've spearheaded the ongoing investigation into the Secret Service, from the Colombian prostitution scandal to the case of a man who was able to penetrate White House security. Scandals that recently forced Secret Service Director Julia Pearson to resign.
He's out.
Now this frantic call for backup to Nashville police is raising new questions. 2 Secret Service agents were investigating threatening comments on Facebook about the president, and the Nashville man who posted them had refused to let the agents into his house.
He shut the door in our face and went around the corner. Looked like, we're not sure if he possibly had the gun in his hand.
In a letter first sent by Nashville's top cop to Secret Service headquarters, Chief Steve Anderson wrote, the resident refused to come outside and shouted back, "Show me your warrant." So one of the agents then asked the police sergeant to wave a piece of paper in an apparent effort to dupe the resident into thinking they indeed had a warrant.
What he talks about is abuse of power by the Secret Service, not just in Washington, but here in Nashville.
Congressman Jim Cooper is one of the members of the committee who just got the chief's letter detailing the January 2013 incident.
So you can't steamroll a citizen of this country, because we all have rights, and we should know how to exercise those rights.
And that's a basic violation of constitutional rights.
Absolutely.
The incident occurred here in this East Nashville neighborhood, but the chief says when officers arrived, they quickly discovered that Secret Service agents had no legal basis to enter the man's house. And the man who had a legal permit to carry a gun had not actually threatened anyone with it. That's when officers decided to pull out.
It's clear that our security plan was not properly executed.
Since then Director Julia Pearson had promised to clean up the Secret Service, the chief sent her a complaint about the incident. But Anderson said she did not acknowledge my letter. Assistant Director A.T. Smith did call, but his tone at best was condescending and dismissive. The chief added, I realized that I was being told in a polite manner to mind my own affairs.
When he complained to the Secret Service higher-ups, they just seemed to say, hey, let's sweep this under the rug.
That's when Anderson demanded a meeting with bosses inside the Secret Service's Nashville office. He recalled asking, do you think it is appropriate to wave a piece of paper in the air and tell him you have a warrant when you do not have a warrant? Answer, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
This is absolutely appalling.
Thomas Castelli is legal director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Tennessee.
If this is not something that all law enforcement, and I'm talking about from the cop patrolling the streets in our smallest town in Tennessee all the way up to the Secret Service and the FBI, if this is not something that they're taught, then that's a big problem.
A lot of folks maybe just say, oh, well, this is just in Nashville. But if this is symptomatic of a larger problem, it really needs to be solved nationwide.
Now, Metro Police say the resident had not actually committed a crime. Now, as a result of this and other incidents, the police chief says that to protect his officers from being asked to engage in questionable activities, they will now need approval from top brass before they are allowed to work with the U.S. Secret Service, Vicki.
So why do you think he sent this letter, Phil?
Well, he said in the letter that he felt that Congress should know that just changing the person at the top won't be enough. It's also going to require a change in the culture at the mid-level of management within the agency.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Now, late today, the Secret Service issued a statement saying that it had addressed the chief's concerns and that the deputy director had called him to express regret. It continued, the Secret Service values our relationship with the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department. We encourage Chief Anderson to continue to work with the special agent in charge of the Nashville Secret Service Field Office, who is his appropriate contact on matters of mutual concern. Now, you can see the chief's letter and the Secret Service statement at newschannel5.com.
So you see where the feds like to fake everything and falsify a warrant and get the local police to do so. And the Nashville police chief, Steve Anderson, said, we're not doing that. And that's surprising. And I want to point that out because I brought up before, we haven't been seeing a lot of police stand up for the right of the citizen. If the feds are there, they kind of just go along. And we actually see, the opposite happening. Now, I have an interesting one from Ben Swan. Ben Swan questions Reverend Jesse Jackson over claims of racism and Ebola treatment. This guy will use racism for absolutely anything. He's really a disgrace. And people should treat him like that because when there is racism, I believe it should be addressed, but there's racism from every race. And he's all about stirring up people and, causing division between people. He's more racist because he really does believe in the division between white and black. If you're black, you shouldn't stand up for the white guy. That's what it seems to be with this guy. But I'm gonna play this interview here. Ben Swan. It's just I just can't believe this guy.
Well, media has been consumed with stories about the Ebola virus for weeks. Among the discussion have been claims that the first victim to die of the virus here in the United States died because of racism. Thomas Eric Duncan died last Wednesday. The claims of racism have been made by the Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price and by the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who wrote in the Huffington Post, quote, Duncan has a foreign accent, black skin, and no health insurance. From a theological perspective, Thomas Eric Duncan is one of our brothers described by Jesus as the least of these. So what role did his lack of privilege play in the treatment he received? End quote. So the big question, is racism or a lack of privilege responsible for Duncan's death? I had the chance to speak earlier with the Reverend Jesse Jackson about his claims and asked him if there is any evidence that Duncan died from neglect.
There's substantial evidence in the neglect of Eric Thomas. That is Thomas Eric Duncan. There are three protocols the CDC set out. One was identification. If you're from West Africa, Guinea, or Liberia, or Sierra Leone, that should be a signal. That's the epicenter of the Ebola crisis. Second one was diagnosis. to do thorough blood tests and test. He was out of there in 4 hours. That did not happen. The third was safe, secure, and quick treatment. That did not happen. Besides the fact he did not have health insurance. And so all the protocols were missed. And so he, for about 8 days, he didn't get treatment, and he died unnecessarily.
Let me ask you about a couple of those particular issues. For instance, you say that Duncan was treated differently because he was sent home in that initial visit. According to the hospital, he didn't state that he was from Liberia. He specifically said no to questions about whether he had cared for a patient with the deadly virus, which he had, and whether or not he had touched the body of someone who had died in an area affected by the disease. So if Duncan didn't tell the truth out of fear, whatever reason he might have chosen, how do you blame the hospital for not treating him for Ebola specifically?
You must distinguish between the legality of his issue at the border. He went through 5 examinations. You interviewed before you come into the airport, interviewed, tested once you come into the airport, and the 5th stage is you sign the papers. He said he didn't know he had any signs of Ebola. He got into the country, aside from the politics of it, and he walked in the hospital with Ebola. He left out with Ebola. So they dismissed him with the disease, which means he spread the disease even more. What happened at the hospital must be separate from what happened at the Visa and Passport Office.
Okay, let me ask you about this allegation over the ZMapp drug.
And I might add, the attempt to discredit him and make him a criminal is a way of justifying his not getting first-class treatment.
Well,
if he's even if he's a medical refugee, the fact of the matter is we're paying a big price now for not having treated him when he first came into the hospital.
Right, and I don't think necessarily that he's treated as a criminal if he didn't disclose all this information, so much as whether or not he was treated correctly. But I want to ask you about the allegation over the ZMapp drug. It was given to 2 American missionaries who contracted the virus and recovered. Duncan was not given ZMapp, and in your blog you state this. You say, quote, "The use of ZMapp raises the question of privilege. Is it only those with better connections to positions of power who will get a fighting chance to receive this experimental drug," end quote. But in that blog, you didn't mention that the missionary couple who was given ZMapp, they were given it around July 22nd. According to the hospital, ZMapp was not given to Thomas Duncan because it was not available since August 12th, and he first showed up at the hospital in Dallas on September 20th. Instead, he was given an experimental treatment of some other antiviral drug. The question is ZMapp being withheld from patients because of their skin color or because of availability?
I'm not sure. There are those who argue that there were no ZMapp available. We tend not to believe that. But ZMapp is not the only remedy. There is the recovery in Nebraska, the NBC Newsman. There are those recovering in Nigeria and recovering even some within Liberia and even Guinea who don't have ZMapp. So ZMapp is a preferred medicine because it works so well in the case of Emory University. But he went for several days. When he was turned away from the hospital, he got no treatment. He came back, he got no treatment for about 2 days. He was in isolation and on a water drip. And until we took the protest public, he began to get some treatment that was working. As a matter of fact, when we talked with the doctors last Tuesday, his temperature had come down, his blood count had leveled off. He was, in fact, improving, but that was extreme trauma to the kidney and to the lungs, infection. And that could not be overcome. So by Wednesday morning, he died. But clearly, his getting late treatment and little treatment was a big factor in his death.
At some point, was he given antibiotics by the hospital in his first or even second visit to the hospital? My understanding is that in his first visit, he was given some antibiotics and then sent home. Is that not correct?
That's our understanding, but antibiotics is not the answer to the issue. First issue is hydration. He came in, he left after 4 hours on a gurney. He was very sick. He came in with 103-degree temperature and had all the signs of Ebola having come from West Africa. Did not get a thorough diagnosis. The result is that those who treated him as having flu symptoms, they contracted the disease. Even if this were a misdiagnosis, then they put themselves in jeopardy by not having the proper protocol of precautions. And therefore, a nurse is seriously ill today because of the treatment when he came in and was turned away.
And to that point, because it does appear to be a misdiagnosis, because these staff members in the hospital put themselves in harm's way by treating him without taking the precautions. Finally, I'd ask you this. Do you believe that if Thomas Eric Duncan had insurance, there's a comment about insurance here, that if he had had insurance, he would have been treated differently than he was treated? And again, if this goes back to an issue of just a misdiagnosis, isn't that the real culprit here, not racism?
Well, those who have first-class medical insurance have better treatment than those who have Medicaid or who have no insurance. And that's black, white, or brown. There's no doubt about that. That's why the state of Texas, for example, has access to $100 billion from the federal government, from President Obama, in Medicaid. They reject the entire Medicaid package, which would in fact help people who may have Ebola, who may have flu, pneumonia, may need mammograms, a whole range of sicknesses not being dealt with because that state rejects out of hand $100 billion in Medicaid money from the federal government.
Appreciate
now, the extent to which race was, there's several things. There's race, there is timely treatment, there is adequate medical treatment, there's turning a man with a 103-degree temperature on a gurney. All of the signs that should not have been missed.
Absolutely. The signs should not have been missed. Certainly they were, and the end result of that was tragic. Reverend Jackson, thank you for your time. That is civil rights activist Reverend Jesse Jackson. Thank you.
Now, he kind of beat around the questions that were given to him, and he in a way he corrected what he said, but I think it was just trying to divert it away from questioning about the racism part. He tends to do that. I guess nothing new. What we need to understand is none of this is going to be 100%. If they say they come out with the vaccine, will it actually be successful on most of the population, or would it actually be more harmful? It's something that we have to question in the society we live in. Would you be better off if they started quarantining people to go into quarantine or run away? You have to question things like that in the society we live in. And that is sad. We live in a society where if they say they're going to help you, you have to almost run away or take it with a grain of salt and question it to the fullest, because it's just more likely that they're going to try to control you, detain you. I see end game coming, it seems, and this end game is basically, I believe it to be a worldwide reset for the elitists. They want to be able to use pandemics worldwide or any type of worldwide event to reset, to keep control. And the whole Ebola thing is something that is really, even if it's not being helped along or not devised by the elitists, I think they're going to use it to the full extent that they can. They have this right there at their fingertips that they can use it and try to quarantine people. They've put the legislation in place to do things like that. They set the groundwork that they could easily do things like that. And I was watching last week, and I was going to play it last week, and I didn't. But it was from Breaking the Set, Abby Martin. And it was, did the UN just pass the Global Patriot Act? And this might amaze you. it really kind of almost in a way set things into it lined everything up with being able to crack down on dissent, use these epidemic type things to their advantage. They can use everything in combination, and I think this is important.
As the 2014 UN General Assembly comes to an end, world leaders are giving themselves a pat on the back for attempting to tackle every problem from climate change to Ebola. But perhaps no achievement has been highlighted more by diplomats than an anti-terrorism resolution unanimously passed by the Security Council last week. All 15 members of the Council approved Resolution 2178, which condemns violent extremism and calls for member states to prevent funding for terrorists and crack down on their ability to travel. Sounds common sense enough. After all, who wouldn't get behind condemning terrorism? But some civil liberty advocates are concerned that the resolution contains similar elements as the USA Patriot Act, a 9/11 piece of legislation that codified much of the mass surveillance state and Fourth Amendment violations we see today. And despite these concerns, there's been virtually no scrutiny of the vagueness of the resolution's language and its specific provisions. So here to discuss how this resolution could change the behavior of world governments, I'm joined now by RT correspondent Marina Portnaya. Marina, let's start by outlining exactly what UN Resolution 2178 calls for with regards to restricting international travel and enhancing global surveillance.
Well, Abby, the resolution requires all UN member states to take a series of measures to prevent the movement and recruitment of foreign terrorist fighters. So, for example, law enforcement agents now have the authority to prevent and suppress what they deem as recruiting, organizing, transporting, or equipping of individuals who travel to a foreign country for the purpose of committing terrorist attacks. Officials can prevent people from traveling if they have, quote, credible information that provides reasonable grounds, unquote. But what that actually means, we don't know because that statement wasn't defined in the resolution.
Extremely interesting there, because all we heard was kind of a round of applause that everyone can agree to this one measure, Marina. And considering that the UN is only as powerful as the member states that make it up, does this resolution actually have any legal backing behind it? And why do you think it was passed unanimously without much debate?
Oh, make no mistake, this resolution has a lot of backing, and it is legally binding because it was adopted by the UN Security Council. That means violating this resolution would be a violation of international law. You have to consider the climate under which the resolution was unanimously adopted. We just saw the U.S.-led coalition of airstrikes against Iran and Syria begin. The U.S. says it was to target Islamic State militants. Europe also just announced that 3,000 of its citizens have traveled overseas to join ISIS. The U.S. says at least 100 Americans have done the same. So with the fear over these foreign terrorist fighters growing, what country wants to be the one to veto or vote against a resolution that's allegedly aimed at combating an international threat? So here we have clearly all these countries of the Security Council agreeing on a text.
And so let's talk about the concerns here. Why are civil liberties advocates concerned with the text?
Well, Abby, if you read the text of the resolution, it requires governments to grant law enforcement authorities a wider scope to monitor and suppress the travel and other activities of suspected foreign terrorists. But how each country defines potential terrorists or jihadists is different. This could allow countries to monitor more people in the name of international security. Additionally, Human Rights Watch says the resolution is rampant with potential due process violations because the text doesn't articulate the process in which suspects would be denied their right to travel. And some critics say some provisions of the resolution actually promote the idea that people can be prosecuted for their thoughts and beliefs, but not their actions. So basically, this resolution does not specifically detail what exact criminal conduct is a prerequisite for detention.
You bring up a really good point, which is that it's kind of all up to the discretion of these member states, Marina, of what deems a terrorist threat or extremist thought, radicalization. Of course, there's also worries from some advocacy groups about racial profiling, but it does say specifically that it would not base stereotypical profiling prohibiting travel. Is there any reason why those people should be concerned?
Well, yes, of course, the resolution does say that there should be no racial profiling used at all. But according to foreign policy, one provision in the resolution encourages states to employ what's called evidence-based traveler risk assessment and screening procedures. That means that they could include travelers' previous itinerary for potential grounds for detention. That means that if an immigrant is visiting a family somewhere in the Middle East or North Africa, they're more likely to be stopped and questioned at the airport than someone that's visiting maybe the UK, for example. One counterterrorism expert has predicted that the resolution's warning to avoid racial profiling will be ignored and that more people with long beards and skull caps will be taken out of line at airports than the guy wearing, a polo shirt or a suit and tie.
Right. I mean, of course, we hear that with stop and frisk, right? That's not racial profiling, but then you look at the actual statistics, and of course, that's what's going to be happening. But of course, there's also concerns that this resolution could be used for an excuse to implement repressive measures on populations as well. Why?
Well, because the resolution could end up giving states new tools to crack down on separatist groups or dissidents or activists by actually branding them as terrorists. Because critics say the text of the resolution, it is vague enough that it leaves it up to each country to decide who to target. Think about countries like Bahrain or Saudi Arabia who are already squashing political opposition groups. The fear is that now those said governments and other governments too, we shouldn't just limit it to them. It could be any country, can label anyone who's an inconvenience to them as a foreign terrorist fighter or suspected foreign terrorist fighter.
Marina, it's a shame that kind of ISIS has overshadowed the intense scrutiny over the NSA surveillance program that we've been seeing in years past. It's just really unfortunate that they're using this as kind of a linchpin to crack down even more. Thank you so much for bringing attention to it, Marina Portnoy. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Abby.
So you have it. Give me a second here. You have it where basically they can use this to block your travel, and this can be alternative news, new media, independent journalists too. All they have to say is they think you might be committing some type of terrorist activity by flying overseas. Just got an alert. Fox News. Breaking news. Plane carrying second Dallas nurse stricken with Ebola flies to Atlanta hospital. So there's something a little bit new. With everything going on, should we not be worried? It seems everything's being just put into hyperdrive almost. I got one from WND.com. Disturbing mystery affecting your favorite news sites. It says here, those who run Watchdog News websites are scratching their heads and trying to make sense of the latest data released by a California company that measures website traffic. According to data for July through September, almost every major website from WND to the Drudge Report and Breitbart saw its rankings drop on Alexa.com, while pro-government sites mostly went up. Alexa Internet Inc. is a subsidiary of Amazon.com. Familiar names in alternative media like the Drudge Report, Breitbart, InfoWars, The Blaze, Newsmax, WND, FoxNews.com, The Daily Caller all saw their rankings plummet, while sites such as NPR.org, The Daily Chaos, Democracy Now!, and Media Matters and Think Progress all rose in the rankings. The lower the number on the graph, the higher the ranking, with one being the best. And they have all the graphs here from Alexa Says Alexa purports to measure the traffic of thousands of websites around the world and then assign a ranking to each site. The lower the number, the higher ranking of the website. The data can be important because it is used along with that collected by a handful of similar companies like Comscore, Quantcast, and Google Analytics to determine placement of advertisements that websites rely on to pay the bills and keep running. Tucker Carlson, founder of Washington, D.C. based The Daily Caller, said the data being put out by Alexa doesn't square with that being reported by his own analytics. We had 13,557 or 557,850 unique visitors in September, Carlson told WND. By comparison, we had 12,784,656 unique in August, so Alexa would be wrong if they are reading the data correctly. The following are Alexa rankings for Fox News and PBS. The staff at Austin, Texas-based InfoWars was equally perplexed by the numbers. As a certified member of Alexa, we find that these trends troubling because in their very own subscription data on their site, we have had significant growth for the period indicated, said InfoWars reporters. In a emailed statement, InfoWars is also seeing increase in another indicator, its largest YouTube channel. Our analytics indicate 305,000 views on 8/1/14, trending upwards to 456,000 views on 10/11/14. This is views per day and represents a 50% rise in views during that period, the staff said via email. And it goes on to show more examples of it, and it definitely seems like they're pushing hard to just bury and take down alternative media and any resistance to what they're doing. I really don't have any other, conclusion when it comes to that, because everything just piled on top of each other just seems like they're ramping it up. And it seems that no one's really taking what's going on right now too seriously. Because if this keeps growing the way it is, the whole Ebola with the executive orders and the signing of NDAA and the UN doing what they're doing, if we don't see a reversal in some of this, it's going to turn around and bite us in the butt. And I think the Ebola is the one that's being ramped up and used. And I have another one here from AMTV. Ebola bioweapon to control unmitigated population growth. And we've seen the update to the Georgia Guidestones. That was an official update to the stone where there was a missing corner and they added a block to it. 2014. Is this what they're going to use? And I fear it is. I don't want to be the fearmonger, but you really start to see that they talk about this stuff openly. They've been progressing towards this stuff slowly, and now we seem to be reaching an endpoint where something's got to either break or they're going to succeed. We really have to question these things.
Hi, here's the situation. I need everybody to sit down. look worse than it is. Have people coming on that aren't, we've all been watching the news, so they look like they're in a bubble. They're all, everybody's
Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. I believe the spread of the deadly Ebola virus that took root in West Africa, sub-Saharan countries, namely originating in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and then spreading to other countries like Nigeria, is a bioweapon. I think the United States federal government is behind it. In fact, I did a very specific documentary to this. I encourage you to watch, link in the description box, Ebola, the truth about the outbreak. And this is 2014, and these are serious allegations. But I know historically the United States federal government has been behind these types of Orwellian plots to study deadly viruses and deadly diseases. Now, over the weekend, the second nurse, not the one in Spain who already contracted the disease wearing a full hazmat suit, but a second nurse treating Thomas Eric Duncan, who recently died, who was doing so well, according to head of the CDC, Tom Frieden, that he croaked. They were so optimistic of his recovery that he died. But a second nurse, not the one in Spain, but a new one, a second nurse in Dallas, who was also treating Thomas Eric Duncan in full protective gear, one of those freakish-looking hazmat suits of which the U.S. State Department has ordered over 160,000 units mysteriously prior to the outbreak, still contracted the disease. Yet the CDC wants us to believe that the virus isn't airborne, or at the very least it's being transmitted by other methods. Now, there's been only 2 times in my recent memory, since I've been alive, where a government official has told me and told the general public not to panic. The first time was in 2008 with George W. Bush, right before the deadliest stock market crash in the history of the world that wiped out trillions and trillions of dollars from the U.S. and global economy, and then resulted in multi-trillion-dollar bailouts and 0% interest rates that are still in effect today. Not to mention millions and millions of foreclosures, bankruptcies, and just utter chaos, not just on Wall Street, but mostly Main Street. Now the second time, CDC Director Tom Frieden is telling you and me not to panic about Ebola. Well, I don't know about you, but when my leadership tells me not to panic, I panic because it means they're lying to you. It means they're lying to us. They're lying to me. And again, this disease does not appear to be one of the old strains. Doesn't appear to be Zaire because we now have 2 nurses that knew they were around the virus, taking extreme precaution, wearing fancy hazmat suits that were aware they were treating this deadly, virulent disease that have now mysteriously come down with the virus. Again, put 2 and 2 together, that doesn't make sense at all. I mean, hey, if a hazmat suit doesn't work, then why wear one at all? Now, if these nurses are contracting the disease wearing full protective gear, imagine how many people have also contracted the disease prior to Thomas Eric Duncan even arriving at the hospital. They had quarantined over 100, but you can only imagine there's potentially hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not soon to be millions, maybe tens of millions of Americans who have already contracted the disease. And again, I believe it's a bioweapon, folks. Why would the United States continue to keep our borders open? Why would they not stop incoming flights from the affected Ebola hot zone? Why would the president simply just check a temperature as these people are entering the United States? Remember, Thomas Eric Duncan wasn't showing a temperature when he came to the U.S. He was fine. He was still in the incubation period. And again, I'll ask the question, how many more Thomas Eric Duncans are there that we don't know about? Again, there's been very many historical examples throughout history where the U.S. government has specifically knowingly infected patients with a virulent and or deadly disease. One such case was the Tuskegee example that I cited in my documentary, where the U.S. Public Health Service actually knowingly infected patients with the syphilis virus and told them they were actually receiving free health care, but when in reality, they were knowingly infecting these patients with the disease. 201 of them, of the, I believe, 500 or 700 they had under study at the time, going over a 40-year period, they actually infected them to study the natural progression of the disease, targeted specifically rural African-American black men. Kind of like what's happening now in sub-Saharan Africa. You know, it's not me, it's declassified reports like the memorandum that I showed in the documentary, where Henry Kissinger, famous for quoting that depopulation is in the best interest of the American people. These declassified documents with, on the header, attention to the president and the Department of Defense, people like the Secretary of State, et cetera, talking about how unmitigated population growth in this part of the world where the Ebola virus just happens to be situated is an extreme national security risk to the United States federal government. You see, the U.S. federal government has a self-interest in this disease. Not only do they have a self-interest in controlling the potentially unmitigated population growth in these third world countries, of course, natural resources, there's ore, there's all kinds of things that we want in this part of the world, but they also happen to own, the CDC, a government agency, own the patent to the deadly Ebola virus and 70% of its mutated, potentially mutated strains. Again, this virus, and let me preference, I'm not a scientist, but this virus isn't following the natural progression or course of the Zaire strain. It looks and appears to be something completely different. Again, the second nurse here over the weekend contracting the disease wearing a full hazmat suit. Again, if the hazmat suits don't work, then why even wear a hazmat suit? The head of the CDC, Tom Frieden, calling this the worst outbreak since AIDS. And the President of the United States, in the meantime, calling it an unlikely event several months ago. People like me here at AMTV and some others out in the blogosphere telling you that you should be extremely worried. That if they're telling you not to panic, you should panic. That by keeping our borders open, the disease will spread here to the United States of America. And it's exactly what's happened. Again, this isn't rocket science. Even if the federal government had their best intentions, they're going to screw it up. People are going to continue to flood over our border and infect innocent Americans, unknowingly or not. But the actions by the president, by the administration, a report I read this morning blaming the GOP on the outbreak, just shows how politicized this event actually is. Again, Obama's unlikely event is now as likely and as real and fatal as the deadly Ebola virus itself, with a very high kill rate. And again, I'll ask the question, how is this not manslaughter? You know, if you were to drink a six-pack and then shoot a bunch of Jack Daniels and mistakenly go kill a family of four, driving illegally while drunk, you would be prosecuted under the full extent of the law, if not receive the death penalty for that action. Yet the president does the same things on behalf of thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of Americans that are now not only exposed to the deadly virus, but will assuredly die. Again, this thing has a 50 to 75% kill rate, folks, an incubation period anywhere between 2 to 21 days. Again, personally, I think that this is a bioweapon. And remember, it's not me that always fearmongers around this. It's your government that has been fearmongering about terrorism and bioweapons for several decades now. With the passage of the Patriot Act, the September 2001 terror attack cover-up, the Boston bombings, it's your government that constantly fearmongers you into submission, saying that bioterror is a very significant threat, that EMPs are a very significant threat to the national security of the United States. Yet we have a virus, a deadly virus spreading now that is uncharacteristically showing and not matching, in my opinion, to previous strains, the most well-known strains like the Zaire form, with nurses wearing full-blown hazmat suits coming down with the deadly disease and virus when they know that they're operating around such a sinister disease. Again, none of it adds up. None of it makes sense unless there's intention behind it. Again, there's either gross intention to murder innocents, to infect knowingly Americans here in the United States, just like the Tuskegee experiment, the famous experiment that ran for 40 years, where the U.S. Public Health Service and the federal government knowingly infected African-American men with syphilis to study it. Fact, not hearsay, not a conspiracy. It's either that, it's either malicious intent, again, to control the unmitigated population growth in that part of the world, sub-Saharan African nations in West Africa, African-American men, women, and children, or it's gross incompetence. And either way, it's manslaughter, it's death, it's chaos. And it's all being brought to you by the President of the United States, our government officials, both at the right and the left of Washington, D.C. today. Again, folks, I believe this to be a bioweapon. Get it out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard-hitting in your face. Watch
AMTV. Now, he pointed something out that, you know, we are continued to be called, you know, fearmongers, along with, you know, conspiracy theorists and whatnot, but fearmongers. But like he pointed out, really, is it not the government that's the fearmongers? are they not the ones that incite the fear by allowing the spread of this unmitigated, really? They're like, we'll worry once you have it. And by then you've already spread it. And in the handling of it, it's getting spread some more. And you have to really just come to the conclusion that they're not looking out for your best interests. They really are looking at ways to use this to their advantage. Okay. I'm going to try to find something here. I had an article here looking through all of this and not seeing it. I was hoping just to go back in my history. Doesn't look like that's gonna work. Pretty sure it was there. Apparently not. Let me see if I can find the article again. Found it through Facebook. Probably long gone by now. Okay. See if this works. Usually close out Facebook. I don't know if any of you have been having the same problem, but if Facebook's running, all of a sudden your internet kind of just goes complete crap. Which I just had Skype pop up and show me red bars, and luckily I didn't lose it. Okay, let's see if I can find it here. Okay, I found it here. Now, I don't know if any of you have noticed, but Vice News has really been going really against the libertarian movement. And when you see that, well, Murdoch and Soros tend to have their damn money behind Vice, you might see why. I don't know if how many of you are aware, but we just had the New York City Liberty Fest that went on. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it out there, which I was planning on it, but did not turn out to happen. Vice puts out this article, which I'm going to read it and really kind of point out some things. This Saturday, Derek Rose, a think this is the beginning, yeah. It said the title of the article is "Libertarians Are Done with Politics," which a lot of people are. A lot of libertarians have shied away from politics, and I've talked about this on the broadcast before. But it says here this Saturday, Derek Brose, a dreadlocked anarchist from Texas, was sitting alone reading in the VIP room of New York City's Liberty Fest while preparing to give a speech on how to dismantle the government. As the room filled with what Brose referred to as celibitarians, he sat absorbed in his book, The Art of Not Being Governed, an anarchist history of upland Southeast Asia. Among the anarcho-libertarians who turn out for this annual convention for the various sects of the freedom-loving fringe, Brose's resume is impressive and includes such items as selling non-GMO seeds and hosting an anarchist talk show. Earlier this month, he was arrested outside Houston City Council for disorderly conduct and abusive language during a demonstration against water fluoridation. He's what he calls an agorist, or an anarchist-leaning libertarian, which, according to the New Libertarian Manifesto, means he's more focused on direct action than politics. Since Ron Paul's 2012 presidential campaign fizzled out, and arguably before then, libertarians like Brose have grown increasingly skeptical of the political process, already wary of government involvement in economic and social matters. Libertarians have lately been asking themselves whether libertarian politician is a contradiction in terms. The reason we have this love and worship of government is that there are a lot of us running around with mommy and daddy issues we haven't dealt with. Until we do, we are going to keep crying out for someone else to take care of us, for someone else to do the tough work for us, said Brose, who advocates for what he calls do-it-yourself governance, which means he supports community farms, Bitcoin commerce, and radical communes. And you notice how they slipped radical communes in there. Brose argues that the libertarian difference to the political system has gotten in the way of the movement's ability to achieve its goals. Some of you are still fighting in the political arena, he said, but the point is to be living example of whatever truth it is you believe in. Other Liberty Fest attendees seem to be in agreement, emphasizing that libertarian politicians and the cult that surrounds the most popular ones are contrary to the ideals of the movement, maximizing autonomy, do-it-yourself governance, and minimizing federal power over individuals. Why wait for your representative to legalize weed when you can smoke it in your RV? Why use tax currency when you can buy plane tickets to Gulch with Bitcoins? I was a big Ron Paul supporter in 2012, said Markel Fontaine, a gay anarcho-capitalist who has become something of a celebrity in the libertarian blogosphere. Then I went to 2012 Libertarian Party presidential candidate and former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, and then I became full-on ANCAP. If Johnson does run in 2016, I wish him good luck. I don't believe in the voting process anymore or federal elections. Despite this dissatisfaction with politics, libertarian politicians haven't given up on the democratic process as a solution to government interference and overreach. In fact, Johnson, the keynote speaker at Liberty Fest, has been preparing a high-profile lawsuit against the Commission on Presidential Debates to open up the debates to third-party candidates. Now out of office and working as a CEO of a marijuana company, Johnson is reportedly planning to run for president again in 2016. Although he's loved by libertarians for his Putinesque demonstrations of grit, including scaling Everest and paragliding in hot gas balloons, he might not be able to lure the movement back to the polls in 2016. He got 1% of the vote in 2012, which was one of the Libertarian Party's best showings. In a speech to attendees Saturday, he did attempt to address the apparent contradictions between his libertarian ideas and the pursuit of higher office emphasizing his background as an entrepreneur and his hands-off approach to governance in New Mexico. I said I was going to bring common sense business approach to government, Johnson said. Issue first, politics last. The private sector created jobs, he said, noting that he vetoed more legislation during his 2 terms as governor than the other 49 governors combined. But I did create an environment where I thought the playing field was more level. Earlier in the day, disgraced former Queens City Councilman Dan Halloran took the stage as Liberty Fest surprise guest, giving his first speech since July when the Republican was found guilty of federal corruption charges for facilitating tens of thousands of dollars in campaign bribes. And in an ironic turn, Halloran blamed the federal government for his breach of conduct, defending his decision to facilitate a payoff scheme to a Democratic state senator of the New York mayoral ballot as a Republican. I did it for a black Democrat who was going to run on the Republican line, he said. That's a threat to the establishment, a threat to the party bosses. That's a threat to the political system that wants everyone to be held to the system. It would have been an independent voice. It would have been a choice. Halloran won't be running for office anytime soon, mostly because he's a convicted felon, but when I asked if he would ever live off the grid in true libertarian fashion, Halloran demurred. I think that's more the anarchist component of the libertarian movement, he said. Like Ron Paul, or Kentucky Senator and presumptive 2016 presidential candidate Rand Paul, I think we can still do things to fix the republic. But for now, at least, most attendees at Liberty Fest seem more inclined to hide out on communes. Now, this is the part that really leaves the article and is trying to leave people that read this article leaning against the libertarian movement, the anarchist libertarian movement. It says, but for now, at least, most attendees at Liberty Fest seem more inclined to hide out on communes and dream up secessionist plots than knock on doors for candidates like Johnson or Rand Paul. Ian Kyofi, the organizer of Liberty Fest, was skeptical of the younger Paul's appeal among attendees. I think Rand learned from his father that if you want to further the libertarian political agenda, you're going to have to make concessions along the way, he said. The purists of the Ron Paul crowd do not accept this. That's because we don't want someone that's going to be manipulative to get to where they are. Of course, if they have to lie and manipulate to get where they are, how do we know if they're lying and manipulating us to get where they are? More libertarian purists understand, we don't want the liars and thieves. That's what we're trying to get rid of. So to fall into the same thing that has led us to where we're at is not a solution. It'll end up leaving us right where we are. So, yep, there's a little hit piece from Vice. Let me see, Vice just shits for brains. Okay, give me a second here. Pull up this other article. Maybe. I guess I can't find it here. Huh. That one disappeared too. Okay, well, I guess I'll just do this next thing I was gonna play here. And this is a lot of you know Josie the Outlaw, Josie IE, Josie the Outlaw. Moved to Keene, New Hampshire. JosieTheOutlaw.com. She put out a video about her on being an outlaw, joining the Free State type movement up there, and activists up there in Keene, New Hampshire. Really being a outspoken woman in the movement. So I'm going to go ahead and play this clip from her.
No, being an outlaw does not necessarily mean being the bad guy. Whenever rights are being violated in the name of law and authority, then it's the duty of every decent moral person to oppose that. First with their words, and then with actions if necessary. Do I respect the law? Not really, if by the law you mean whatever the politicians tell us to do. I respect life and liberty, the right of every individual to be left alone as long as they're not hurting anyone. When the law goes against that, which it does all the time, then it doesn't deserve our respect or our obedience. Am I saying that sometimes it's good to break the law? Yeah, absolutely. When you look back through history, most major injustices have been carried out in the name of law. And most of human progress has been the result of those people who dared to stand up and resist those who claim the right to rule. The difference between a bad outlaw and a good outlaw is the difference between violent aggression and defensive force. Robbery, threats, assault, and murder are wrong because those things violate the rights of others, not because of a rule written on a piece of paper. And when those in power write laws saying that they're allowed to rob, threaten, assault, murder, that's not okay. And that's when you need good outlaws to make things right. Yes, I am anti-government, because government is always the enemy of freedom and justice. Political power is never about getting along or peacefully coexisting. It's about people trying to use the machine called the government to rob and control others. However good your intentions are, if you still imagine that a ruling class can be a good thing, if you still think that the world would be great if only the right person were in charge and calling the shots, you seriously need to rethink things. Am I being extreme? If you want to say that I'm extreme in my support of freedom and my opposition to authoritarian domination, I take that as a compliment. I'm all for cooperation and compromise on a lot of things, but never on principles. I'd have to be a coward to condone a certain level of injustice just so I don't get called extreme. Am I a tolerant person? I'm completely tolerant of all sorts of viewpoints, belief systems, and lifestyles, whether I personally approve of them or not. But when it comes to anyone committing aggression against another, no, I'm not tolerant of that at all. No one should be. And if you're still voting for people who promise to use the power of government to tax and control whoever you don't like, don't pretend to be tolerant. People need to understand, as long as you think that your ideas should be forced on others and others think their ideas should be forced on you, political con men will always use that to empower themselves, while pitting the rest of us against each other, based on race, religion, income level, lifestyles, nationality, basically any difference they can find. Until you stop falling for the politicians' divide and conquer tactics, until you're willing to allow everyone else to be truly free, whether you like them or approve of their choices or not, then don't expect to be free yourself. Now, I'm not looking for a fight. My goal is peaceful coexistence, but those who seek political power do not share that goal, and they have no intention of leaving us alone. They're all about telling you what you must do, what you can't do, how much money you have to give them, and then sending their thugs after you if you disobey. That's what government does, and it's the opposite of getting along. Yes, what I advocate is far outside of the mainstream. If you want a fundamental change in the world, you have to start with a fundamental change inside your own head. People keep believing and doing the same things and wonder why nothing changes. They keep voting for people who promise to take care of them and decide what's best for them, while basically tossing them some scraps while taxing them to death. They keep wanting some political savior to come along with some authoritarian master plan that will save the day. Well, we've been trying that for millennia with consistently horrible results. People have to grow up and stop looking for a leader to save the world. The individual, the family, the community, these are real. These are what matter. Those in power keep doing their song and dance, pretending that if they only had a little more power and passed a few more laws, then everything will be fixed. Why does anyone still believe that? As long as you're looking to some ruler to save the day, you will always be disappointed until the last shred of freedom is stripped from you. No, there's no reason to be proud of being a law-abiding taxpayer. Obedience isn't a virtue. Why do you have a conscience and the ability to judge right from wrong if you're just supposed to ignore all that and do whatever some alleged authority tells you to? Morality matters. Legality does not. Those who are proud to pay taxes and obey politicians' commands are mostly good people, but just horribly misguided. The lies we're taught about authority keep tricking decent people into enriching and empowering liars and crooks. If you want to change the world, you have to start by recognizing the lies yourself. I'd run for office when hell freezes over. Politics will never solve anything because politics and government are the problem. The left and right scream at each other, but neither is morally consistent, and neither is on the side of freedom or justice. The only discussion you'll ever hear in the mainstream media is bickering over whether Republican politicians should spend your money and run your life, or whether Democrat politicians should spend your money and run your life. How about this radical idea that you should be able to spend your own money and run your own life? When have you ever heard that idea on CNN or the evening news? Oh, I'm not on the left-right scale at all. Most people think that all there is arguing over what kind of centralized authoritarian control should rule the world. Then they think that picking what they consider to be the lesser of two evils is the only option they have. But political power, whether it's far left, far right, or anything in between, only leads to wealth and power for the elite, and oppression, poverty, and debt for everyone else. To think that any political party has any intention of changing that is beyond naive. People don't run for political office with the intention of leaving you alone. They do it to acquire power over you and everyone else, and they will always tell the rest of us that we're just stupid, violent animals, and that without them controlling us, we could never survive, which is a ridiculous lie. No, I'm not saying that everyone would be nice if not for government. Obviously, human beings are far from perfect, but giving some of those imperfect people the power to forcibly control everyone else does not improve things. If any idea is silly and utopian, it's the idea that if you give a bunch of politicians dominion over the rest of us, that they will use that power to protect and serve us. When has that ever happened? And why does anyone think it ever will? Some people seem to think that as long as they have their beer and their widescreen TV, everything must be okay. But there's a lot of serious injustice going on in this country and many others that all decent people should be angry about. And righteous anger isn't driven by hatred, but by the love of humanity and justice, and understanding what society could be and will be once people dare to question things and do what's right, instead of just doing and believing whatever those in power tell them to. For humanity to be what it should be, people need to question and reject the authoritarian indoctrination we were all fed. More people need to learn about things like the non-aggression principle, the concept of self-ownership, the idea of voluntarism, and a stateless society. Really, the truth I'm trying to get people to see here is pretty simple and obvious, but we've been deliberately taught not to see it. Now, it may make people uncomfortable to hear this, But really, what the world needs is not law-abiding taxpayers, not people mindlessly obeying and paying tribute to a ruling class. What it needs is more outlaws, the good kind, people willing to think for themselves and be willing to stand against the powers that be, to disobey, to resist. If you really care about liberty and justice, maybe it's time you became an outlaw too.
And that was from Josie Outlaw, josieoutlaw.com, josietheoutlaw.com. And that's with the IE, not a Y. Bringing up these articles here. Now, I've seen some interesting news here. And we have NASA claiming that astronauts to live in Mars simulation dome for 8 months. Kind of awkward. We don't even have our shuttle programs, and we're talking about going to Mars here. This will be a simulation dome, but still, what are we accomplishing by going to Mars? I do think our space exploration definitely needs to be expanded, but I'm trying to figure out, what's our end goal on this. I would like to know more, which I might bring that up Friday. I might try to get into our space program and how it's really been kind of missing lately. And we're kind of stuck in this situation where it seems like we're not growing our exploration like we used to. All this taxpayer money, you think at least we could do some more exploration. We have to rely on China and Russia, which seems odd, for our, astronauts to get to the space station. Okay, I have one here. Oh, give me a second while this stupid thing reloads itself for no reason. Okay. We have another one about the UN. This is going to be interesting for any smokers out there. UN approves increased global tobacco tax during secret session. Washington Times, Moscow, the UN's World Health Organization on Tuesday approved a measure. Why does this keep doing this crap? Sorry, they got these stupid ads that pop up over articles. Pop-ups after pop-ups after that. Okay, now I can actually read this. On Tuesday, approved a measure committing countries around the world to sharply raise excise taxes on cigarettes and other tobacco products. A key step to what critics warn will be a push for a global tax on tobacco meeting in Moscow this week. WHO delegates representing 179 countries And about 90% of the world's population, no, they don't represent 90% of the world's population, and they don't represent the countries. I'll tell you that right now. Voted to move ahead on implementing a key part of the 2003 Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. The WHO is the public health arm of the United Nations. And you hear that? Public health arm. You like how they put that? Okay. I'm going to play this here once this commercial plays through.
I'm Alex Sawyer with your Washington Times News Update. The World Health Organization approved a measure to implement a global tobacco tax in 179 countries. The organization kicked off its Framework Convention on Tobacco Control yesterday in Moscow, Russia, and banned the public and press from attending the meetings. The World Health Organization's mission is to reduce tobacco use by increasing tobacco control policies worldwide, specifically pushing for a global tobacco tax. Thus far, 179 countries, more than 90% of the world's population, have signed on to the organization's treaty. A spokesperson for the World Health Organization said they do not have a comment at this time. For all your news, sports, and commentary, you can go to WashingtonTimes.com.
Okay. So now you have the United Nations doing this. It says the gathering got off to a controversial start when delegates voted to bar members of the media, including a credentialed reporter for the Washington Times, from attending key convention and
when a technology company with a vision.
See, I hate these mainstream websites. It's constant bull crap. Okay. Said plenary events. U.S. and Canadian representatives are also boycotting the event to protest host Russia's recent incursions in the conflict with neighboring Ukraine. The officials said that the tax was justified because tobacco creates an economic burden on society owing to higher health care costs for tobacco-related disease. More than two-thirds of the parties to the organization's treaty reported an increase in tobacco taxes in 2014. According to the WHO's report, parties that have increased tobacco taxes in general experience a corresponding increase in tobacco prices, and in some of those countries, a tax-driven reduction in tobacco consumption has been documented. Now, I'll tell you that right now. Places that do have high tax rates, definitely even here in the United States, states that have high tax rates, there is actually a black market for cigarettes. When they can go across the border and get cigarettes so much cheaper and smuggle them across in their trunk, yeah, you create a black market. There's times where you can spend that money to transport and it still come out cheaper. And that's all, this is becoming another, war on something. The cigarettes are eventually going to be put in the category of drugs as, crack, heroin, and everything else, which I do look at it as a drug. It is addictive. I've been subject to the addiction of tobacco, and that doesn't mean that this is going to help it. All it's going to do is create a black market and eventually turn regular people into criminals, which it already has. People have been caught selling, cigarettes. and, fine. You're not regulated to sell cigarettes, but I went across the board, got cheaper, and I'm able to spend all that money and make a profit. You're not regulated. You're not paying them. And the higher tax rate is not really to stop that. It's to pamper the pockets of these people. And that's exactly what's going to come out of this. Don't expect this to actually accomplish anything. It's just not going to happen. Okay, let's move on to some other articles here. Oh, and by the way, while they'll fly Ebola people around America, no problem. Caribbean island bans visitors from West Africa nations. So just that was something across Drudge Report. Now, what happens when you have politicians that are self-interested, but will kind of pander to the people that are struggling? This one out of truthrevolt.org, maybe. Hillary hypocrisy talks about student debt, hits UNLV Foundation for $225,000 speaking fee. The UNLV student body protested the large fee, especially at a time when the school's tuition increased by almost 20%. Despite objections from a student body which faces a burden of 17% tuition hikes during the next 4 years, probable Democratic Party presidential nominee Hillary Clinton spoke to the UNLV Foundation Monday night, drawing a speaking fee of $225,000. Ironically, in her speech, she opened that more needs to be done to assure young people can achieve their dreams and free students from debt. Ms. Clinton delivered her remarks to a crowd of about 900 people gathered in Bellagio Resort Ballroom for the annual UNLV Foundation dinner benefiting the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Local reporter Venice Toussaint pointed out the Clinton hypocrisy during a Tuesday morning report about the event. Well, Kim and Dana, this is Hillary Clinton's third trip to Las Vegas so far this year, and every time the big question is, will she or won't she run for president? She was asked to last night, and she really did not have an answer, not yet at least, fueling a lot of the speculation about her presidential bid. But to help her make that decision and sway her back toward the White House, she received a clever gift. Some running shoes from Brian Greenspun, the owner of the Las Vegas Sun. Now Hillary Clinton addressed more than a dozen issues in her hour-long speech, from education and energy to foreign policy and Russian President Vladimir Putin, but her appearance at the dinner was also marred with some controversy as she spoke about the rising cost of college tuition and student loan debt. She also accepted a hefty speaking fee of $225,000. Now that's the majority of the $235,000 that the UNLV Foundation collected from donors at the dinner. So she basically, the dinner, all the money they collected, almost all of it went to her, except for $10,000. As Truth Revolt previously reported, the UNLV student body protested a large fee, especially at the time when the school's tuition was increasing by almost 20%. At UNLV, where officials have agreed to raise tuition by 17% over the next 4 years, student government leaders wrote a letter to Clinton last week asking her to return the plan $225,000 fee to the university. If she does not, they say they intend to protest her visit. The students were outraged about this, said Elias Benjuloun, UNLV student body president. When you see reckless spending, it just belittles the sacrifices students are constantly asked to make. I'm not an accountant or economics, so I can't put a price tag on how much we should be paying her, but I think she should come for free. Clinton spokesman Nick Morrell declined to comment on the UNLV students' request. But that's the hypocrisy of politicians. They will tell you to save your money or spend your money or buy things while they're living off of you. This is their only thing that they do is live off of you. They accomplish nothing actually productive in society but to get rich and live a extravagant lifestyle off of the backs of the everyday person. And this will continue to happen as long as the populace keeps voting people into office, keeps allowing people to claim authority over you. This is what will happen. This is what is happening. This is what has been happening. And when is the breaking point for the populace? This has gotten out of control. This is stuff that history would never have. Well, I can't say that history would have imagined it to get this bad. History has imagined. Orwell, Tonkin, these people predicted this because of the same ideology, understanding that you're allowing someone to rule over you. They're ruling over you and they're living off of you. Are you a peasant? Are you a slave? Make your choice. And I'm not asking everybody just to, grab arms and start hitting the street. No. There's ways to do it peacefully. And the most peaceful way is when society rejects the use of force against a nonviolent person, someone that has committed a so-called victimless crime. It's not a crime because there is no victim. So I even kind of throw off the phrase victimless crime. If there is no victim, it is not a crime. So it can't even be a victimless crime. A victimless, unlawful exercise of someone's right, maybe? We are coming up towards the end of the broadcast. I do want to let you know that after this broadcast is over, starting at 8 Central, or 8 Eastern, not Central, 8 Eastern, the continual condition coming up next here on UCY.tv. I picked up a lot of articles off of The Drudge, InfoWars, BenSwan.com, Washington Times, WND, and many others that some of these you could find right at the Drudge Report and get right to them. But we are hitting an interesting time in our lives right now where we have this pandemic starting to seem to break out. Whether it become a full-blown pandemic or not, We see that the people in power are creating a network that will allow them to use this or other pandemic type situations like this to their advantage to control a population. But this could even be farther than that. This could be a chance for them to exercise depopulation, which is a tended goal of people like Bill Gates and others, these eugenicists. And whether it be pandemics like this, vaccines, global warming, they tend to use all these events or so-called events to their advantage. These people think that they're smarter than you, and they manipulate you into believing that they are smarter than you, when really they are just a continual elite group of sick individuals that for generations have had control over the population. And in the end, it's going to be up to you, your neighbors, your community, police and law enforcement agencies, soldiers, other government workers, your family, but most importantly, you. You are the future. We are the future. But as individuals, we have to make those choices. Everybody, as an individual, has to make those choices. Are you going to be a free person? Or are you going to be a government slave? It doesn't mean you have to be violent. It doesn't mean you have to start a armed revolution. What it does mean is you have to be the example of freedom. The best way to be the example of freedom is to, 1, live your life as a free person. 2, be respectful. 3, be compassionate. But probably what should be first, I'll just call number 4, is be prepared. Be prepared for the attacks. Be prepared for the blowback. But also be prepared for the awakening, because it's happening as we speak. More and more people are waking up to the reality of the society that we live in. And as that happens, more people are going to be upset and be seeking freedom. And as people that have already woke up to this system, we need to steer those people to understand the non-aggression principle. We don't want them to become tools of the establishment where they just become some pissed off person running down the street smashing windows out. That feeds the government. What we need is people that are angry, upset, and wide awake to what's going on to stand up and say no more. And I would like to peacefully live my life as I choose. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and I will catch you guys Friday. Take care and stay tuned here on UCY.TV for the continual condition coming up next. Take care.